He's considered the most popular governor in the country for 2 years running, and if you think that's a title Charlie Baker's willing to give up anytime soon, think again. According to a new report from the Boston Globe, the governor is quietly putting together a political team as he mulls running for re-election again in 2022, telling the Globe, quote, "Some of the stuff we're working on will likely take more than 4 years to see our way through it." If Baker does run, he'd be the first governor in the state's history to seek 3 consecutive 4-year terms. And it seems like there's a good chance he will. Online records now show Baker's campaign committee has 5 full-time staffers, pulling in a collective $16 grand a month already, more than 2.5 years before Election Day. In the meantime, as one of the lone Republican politicians holding state office in an overwhelmingly blue region, now dealing with a more conservative state GOP, Baker will have to thread the needle on divisive issues like immigration, abortion, and the millionaire's tax. The reporter behind the story, Boston Globe correspondent and former State House Bureau Chief Frank Phillips, joins me now, along with former Republican candidate for Secretary of State, Anthony Amore, and Steve Kerrigan, former CEO of the Democratic National Convention and president of Barack Obama's inaugural committee. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Frank, let me start with you for obvious reasons. The governor has floated the possibility of running for a 3rd term before. He made some comments in the State House when I was there right after he won re-election. He also mentioned it to John Keller of WBZ last month. I think we have some sound of the governor in video making those comments. Let's take a look.
I've not ruled in or out anything when it comes to a 3rd term. I really enjoy this job. I love the interaction I have with the people of the Commonwealth. I'm incredibly grateful.
But you found evidence that this is not just a theoretical possibility. To your mind, what is the strongest evidence that this is something the governor is gearing up to do?
Well, to give John Keller credit, that piqued my interest. And then I went to look at the campaign finance reports, which I'd been actually looking at earlier, and he was raising money. There's a staff, all of a sudden people are getting paid salaries. There's a headquarters. And it was quite obvious. He took a poll.
Yeah, that jumped out.
Yeah, right. And so it was obvious. And then I went to his people and I said, "Look, what's going on here? This is just not, whimsical talk by the governor. This is a serious effort to keep something going. Now, whether he's going to run for a 3rd term, they emphasize that it's far down the road." But it's a good move, too, politically. I mean, he avoids the lame duck issue, which could undercut some of his political influence at the State House. So people don't know, really. He doesn't have to make up his mind until, really, 2022, really.
I was going to ask you when he would need to either decide to run or not run. You think going into the calendar year?
I think 2020, the fall of 2021, he'd have to let the Republican Party know you got to get a candidate if he cares about it, and he'll have to decide by the end of then.
Anthony Amore, you ran on a ticket with Governor Baker in the last election. What's your assessment, as someone who ran with him, of how serious he is about this?
Well, I'm not privy to any inside info, but I think he has done a great job. He knows that he's very popular, but he loves the job. So he has some long-range plans that he wants to begin. And I think it makes sense for him to be thinking about possibly a 3rd term. We talk about things like transit, housing, the environment. These are the issues that are important to him. And as he says, we didn't get into these problems overnight. We're not going to get out of them overnight either. So the idea that he might stay on makes sense to me. I actually hope he does.
As someone who hopes he does, what are the best arguments you could come up with for him not running again? I'm sure they're out there, even if you're a Baker fan, so what might they be?
I mean, the only ones that come to mind would be the precedents that have been mentioned in Frank's column. But in terms of his ability to do the job, his vigor is unbelievable, as is the lieutenant governors. I was just with her the other day, and the energy that these two have and the obvious passion for the job makes them perfect candidates for a 3rd term. But again, it's so early, it's hard to say.
All right, Steve, I'm guessing that you might have a more robust list of reasons for Baker not to seek a 3rd term than Anthony does. Am I right about that?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I didn't want him to seek a 2nd term or, frankly, serve a 1st term. But it makes total sense if you're Charlie Baker to consider a 3rd term or a fourth term or a fifth term. If you're looking at the Republican Party on the national scale, there's no room for Charlie Baker-like Republicans. And
you mean because he is so moderate and
so
into bipartisanship, relatively speaking?
Well, which some would say, some in my party would say he's forced to be because of our Democratic majority in the legislature. He has done good things. He's worked with Democrats on everything from rolling back our anti-abortion laws here in Massachusetts and protecting transgender rights and a bunch of things that would not go well in the Republican Party on the national side. So if you're looking to stay engaged and active in public service, why not seek a third term? He could be using this organization, the campaign structure, to start to put his brand of the Republican Party in place here in Massachusetts over what Jim Lyons. It's sort of a shadow Republican Party over what Jim Lyons has.
Let's talk a little bit about that question of what it means to be a Massachusetts Republican, because it's something I'm fascinated by. I think you guys are fascinated by it, and there may be 4 or 5 viewers out there who are also fascinated by it. My sense is that Governor Baker really is genuinely passionate about modeling what he thinks politics can be and should be for the rest of the country, with Republicans and Democrats working together even on issues where you don't expect them to. But now there's a new state party chairman, Jim Lyons, heading up the Mass GOP. Frank, for people who don't know and are watching at home, what's his approach been to building the Republican brand in Massachusetts?
Jim Lyons, a former state representative, a very nice guy, but very, very conservative and very religious in his beliefs on abortion and social issues, and it's quite the opposite. And he was the choice of the Republican State Committee last January to take over the party, and Charlie Baker's candidate failed to get the votes pretty significantly. And it was a real takeover by the conservative wing of the party. And like you, Adam, I go way back with, they're more fun to cover than the Democrats, because I mean, it really does get
present company.
I was going to say that's not very nice.
They're much more out there ideologically.
Yeah, and it's fun because they give Charlie a lot of trouble, and as a reporter, that's what I enjoy doing.
Watching
and it's been it has been a long history in the Republican Party of very conservative. Going back to Gordon Nelson and people like that who were really wackos.
But I thought
Gordon Nelson they found him with his wife hanging naked out of the car, dead drunk on the expressway.
This is a story I'd never heard. I got to ask about that when the
he finally had to resign his position. He finally had to resign.
Wow. So I thought, not to get too down in the weeds, I want to pull back in a second, talk about Governor Baker a little more, but I thought that Governor Baker had taken control of the Massachusetts Republican Party.
No. I mean,
he spent
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
He spent $1 million, and he won't tell us where that got. That's a real bugaboo with me. He spent $1 million, raised $1 million from fat cats, and one dinner it was, to go out and buy the state committee, and he spent at least that much. And he's gone out and he refuses to tell us where he's gotten his money from. It's outrageous that he does that. Anyway, that's another point. But he did buy and he barely won a majority. He kept Kirsten Hughes on as chairwoman for another couple of years. But this time around, they went south on him, and he's talking about doing it again.
But he basically had like a crop top for coattails in his election. He did nothing for down ballot. Due respect, I know you campaigned a lot with him, but for down ballot, the Democratic Party picked up Jim Lyons' seat that he held in the House is now held by one of the most liberal members of the
Ask Anthony how much help they got from the party
I got significant help from the party.
But in order for him to have taken over the party,
what'd you get? What'd you get?
In terms of what?
Real support.
All right,
from Baker.
From Baker, I get tremendous support.
Not to put you on the hot spot.
No, I don't mind at all.
I would just say, in order for him to have truly taken over the party, he would have had to do party building, precinct-based party building, all the way up. And I agree with Frank. He raised a lot of money on that idea and then did nothing with it.
Let me ask you about the question of ownership of issues. You said that Governor Baker has said he's interested in fixing things that are going to take a while to fix. But isn't there a risk for him? I know he's got these super high popularity numbers, but after 2 full terms in office, if people still feel like the T is breaking down every other day, or like their commute is still growing exponentially every year, isn't it going to be tough for him to say, well, I haven't had enough time, give me 4 more years?
Sure. Okay. Absolutely. He'll be accountable just like any other public official. And he should be. But I think he thrives on that public accountability. I don't think he's ever shied away from it. I think that he will continue to work on these things because I do believe they're very important to him. So I don't see that as a problem.
All right, what about trickle-down politics here? Because Maura Healey was thought by a lot of people to be at least thinking about running for governor against Charlie Baker. She took a pass. Would she sit it out again if he decided to seek a third term, or would she say, no, this is something I want to go for? Or, we've heard that Marty Walsh might be interested in being governor, yet they've got this super fun buddy thing going on. Would he run against the governor?
I will say I think it does upend what was likely to be our Democratic primary with Walsh and Healey at the top. It might upend that because both of them have a pretty bright future ahead of them, and they're not, long in the tooth, so they have plenty of time to wait it out. I think the person who's probably the most disappointed by this is not Maura Healey or Marty Walsh, but it's Karen Polito, who has to be sitting there waiting. And there was reports earlier this year, right after the election, before he started raising lots of money, that he had told, Governor Baker had told Finance Committee members to stop raising for him and start raising for her, that he was going to put all his energy behind her. And now she's sort of left holding the bag while he's seeking a third term. If she runs for a third term as lieutenant governor, I'd be surprised.
I didn't see any disappointment in her. I think they make a great team. They work together perfectly. They both know the roles that they have, and they seem to really enjoy them. I don't think that'll be a problem.
You don't think that she would think this has never happened before? We've never had a governor serve 3-4-year terms. I want that job.
Not consecutively.
Yeah, not consecutively. Mike Dukakis, of course, being the exception.
It's a good job, and she seems to relish. She's the only one that's ever gone to 351 cities and towns and met with everybody out there.
Carrie Healey.
Yeah, I was going to say. You guys always claim that every few years.
We got to leave it there. Unfortunately, stick around,
that's
though,
the only
Frank
place they're
Phillips.
allowed to go.
What was his name? Gordon, for anyone who wants to
Gordon
know.
Nelson.
Gordon Nelson. All right, stay so you can give me the full.
He married Texas Lil, and she was hanging out naked, and they were both drunk, dead drunk, and they finally had to resign his chairmanship.
You're going way
This is a family show.
Republicans
Steve
here.
Kerrigan, Anthony Amore, Frank Phillips, thanks to all of you.
Thanks, man.